All right, so we're going to get started with the assignment. I need to be on this one, right? Yeah, here we go. So, I can close this one. So we're going to be working on our pegged pose-to-pose style ball bounce. And to do this, we're going to be showing our understanding of these principles of animation, which I will not read out to you. You can see that. And to get started, we're going to need to create a couple of things. We need a ground plane of some kind, so please don't just have your ball bounce off the bottom of the camera frame. That is incredibly lazy. So you need to create some kind of ground. You need to create a pedestal for your ball to start from. You'll see why that's necessary in a second. And then we also need some kind of ball. Your ball must have some kind of design on it that makes it clear and evident that your ball is in motion and having squash and stretch affected on it, so it can't be a solid color. It needs to have some kind of design. And then you're going to be making this ball bounce here. And I just have a screenshot here, and we'll talk about what this graphic represents here in a second. Here is the video. So shouts out to Pierre Crot. I've used this video for years. You're the GOAT. All right, here we go. So that's just the ball bouncing, right? Boom. I want to say it's a racquetball. So, and so that image there at the end is what I have put at the bottom of your assignment page, or the second page rather. And this represents where the ball is at in space over the course of this bounce. Now, for today, we're just going to be worried about getting the sum total number of frames lined out with our translate tool, as well as just the top and bottom location of each of these bounces will be. So, for our first pass, we're keeping it very limited. We're just going to be setting some translate keyframes on our ball where it's going to be at a point in time. Because you can see here, based on where the drawings are at, how the acceleration is happening. They're spread out down here towards the bottom because that's where the most acceleration is happening. Up here at the top is where the effective gravity is sort of evening out, and then so it hangs a little bit and then comes back down. So that is the stuff that we'll be doing when we cover our new notes tomorrow. So going back up here, we need to make three things: ball, pedestal, ground. So this will be 3BB. So I demoed this in my first period. So create scene. Okay, great. All right, so I already have a drawing in here, and I'm going to name this BG. It's my background. And I'm going to make some grass here. So I'll just take the green that's already here and mess with it a little bit. Seems good. Okay. And I'm just going to make a rectangle down here towards the bottom of my frame and fill it with green. So now I have a ground plane. Cool. I'm not going to worry about extending my exposure just yet. I'm going to add another drawing, and this will be my pedestal. Whoops, I didn't spell that right. Pedestal. Add and close. And let's make a new color for that. And I made it like Sully blue in the last one. Okay. And then for this one, oh, and the reason why you need a pedestal, to go back to the reference, is because we don't have a guy's hand to drop it from. So it's going to roll off a pedestal. So that's how we're skipping over that. So back here, we're making the pedestal. Boom. Paint bucket. Sweet. Now I have a pedestal. And now I need a ball. So quick discussion about the ball. So you can either make the ball in here as a drawing. So I'll name this ball. And that's all well and good. You can use the ellipse. I'm going to use vectorized line. I'm going to hold shift, make a big round circle, and then I could fill it with red. And here's the key. You need some kind of design on this ball. So you'll see let me just add a, let me add a quick star. That one's not super great. So I added a star to this. Why do you need a design? So again, as I was saying a moment ago, the design allows us to see when the ball is being affected by squash and stretch, as well as when the ball is being rotated. Two things that we'll be adding when we finish this up. So that's why you need to have some kind of design. Again, it can be just as simple as I have a solid red ball and a star on it. You can get more complicated if you want. For example, so I'm going to get rid of this. I have prepared a ball in Photoshop by making a layer mask on this picture of Mike Sully Wazowski. So I just made a circle, again with a alpha channel transparency on here, and then I saved it as a PNG so that it has transparency, and then I named mine, where is it? ballbouncemike.png. So if you need help doing this, just let me know. I can show you what to do. But this way, I'm going to go ahead and import an image and bring in ball bounce Mike. Keep his bitmap, create a layer. Okay. Boom. There's my ball. Great. So now, what I need to do is first I am going to extend my timeline. And I'm going to, bless you, I'm going to go to frame 150. And I'm going to select all three of my channels here. So I just clicked and dragged down them. Whoops. Or up them, I guess, whatever. And then right click, extend my exposure. So now everything is visible for that whole time. And now I'm going to want to put ball bounce Mike into a peg. And that way I can now animate ball bounce Mike. So before I start doing my ball bounce, I need to get the size of the ball to be smaller. So I'm going to grab my scale tool. And I do not want this to be a keyframe. So I want to turn animate off. So red guy. And this is kind of important. So I'm going to edit the image layer, not the peg, to change the size of my ball. And I'll explain why in a second. So I'm going to select ball bounce Mike. Again, I'm on the scale tool and animate is off. So red guy, not gold guy. Hold shift from the corner and scale this ball down. Grab my move tool. Bring ball bounce Mike up here. All right, cool. So I'm going to start right there. Now, why did I do this on the drawing and not the peg? So remember our channels here. When we were doing the Pac-Man, we had to mess with the scale factor. Sometimes your scale factors were not solid 1 because you had the scale changes for Pac-Man and the ghosts and such on the peg. So what you can see here is that because I didn't scale ball bounce Mike from the peg, the values of scale on my peg stay at 1 and 1, which will be very useful for when I'm doing my squash and stretch later. Because then as I need to get the ball back to perfectly round, I know that I just need to make the scale for my peg go back to positive 1s for both X and Y. The size of the ball got changed on the actual image layer. So, good for us. That's why we're doing it on the image layer and not the peg. But now, we're ready for golden guy. We're ready for translate tool because the size is correct. Bring my peg onto the center of ball bounce Mike. And I'm going to bring this peg to the top of my timeline, so it's on top of everything. And now I'm just going to set a keyframe on 1. And then going back to my image here. So for our reference image here, this is circles made around the location of the ball in space. This does not demonstrate squash and stretch. It's just circles, perfect circles. But what you can use this for is that this is going to show you where the ball is at in time, but the ball is on twos. So I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times 2. The ball is at the ground on frame 20. So I'll go forward to frame 20. Move the ball out a little bit, not crazy far, and then down until it's touching the ground. And then now I'm also going to turn on my control. Ball goes to the ground. Don't worry about the fact that it does not have arc. We will fix that when we are finalizing this with tomorrow's discussion, right? So now we got the ball on the ground. Next place we want the ball to go is the top of the next bounce. So I'll bring up my reference. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times 2, 18. 18 frames in the future, frame 38. Then if we look back at our image, it's about 3/5 of the height. So it loses a lot, 60%. Or it goes down to 60% of the previous bounce's total height. So something like that. Now, what do you think? We have this nice little arc going on here. What do you think needs to happen to this keyframe down here? Not a trick question. This is something that we just had to do. What do you think needs to happen at this frame in time? You did it for Pac-Man. Someone please say it out loud. What do I need to change about this keyframe?
Another keyframe next to it?
No, but you're sort of on the right track. That's for when we're doing the squash and stretch. This ball is approaching the ground and arcing through the bottom. What do you think should happen when it gets to the ground? The tension should go up because we want the ball to move straight at the ground until it hits it. Right now it's trying to arc through the ground. So let me go back to here. Translate tool, click this keyframe, tension to 1, and now you can see the ball accelerates straight into the ground, hits the ground, and then rebounds in the opposite direction. Now we're back up at the top. Back to my translate tool. We're going to count frames again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times 2. 16 frames into the future. So we will go to frame 54. Down to the ground. Over slightly. Again, this midpoint should be equidistant between these two. The ball is not flying, feet ahead of itself on each bounce. It's very narrow bounces. So there we go. And let's count. So we're headed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 14 frames into the future. So that'll be frame 68. And again, we want to take away about 40% of the height. And again, transform tool, tighten up the bottom, tension to 1. All right, so this is 14 here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times 2 is 12. So now we're on frame 80. Hitting the ground on frame 80. Okay. Yep. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So frame 90. And then 1, 2, 3, 4. 8 frames forward, frame 98. Boom, boom. Down a little more. Then make sure I go back and get this keyframe, tension to 1. I'll grab this keyframe that I just made, tension to 1. Boom. So today, folks, I am going to finish this here on the video. But the takeaway is you're going to set the translate keyframes only today. So just the translate keyframes. So just keep counting and moving. And again, the top point of it should be in the middle of this. These bounces, these arcs, do not need to have exceptionally wide distances. Again, if you look at this, you can see these are not exceptionally wide. Great. So just continue along. So this is my third bounce. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then 4 down, so it's 8 and then 8. So we'll go 8 frames in the future, 106. And then 8 frames in the future again. Okay. And in fact, this is probably still a little too high. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So 6 and then 6. Now it's starting to really die down. And then don't forget to get these tensions set up right. Then it's just like, this is bounce 5. Then the 6th and 7th bounce are just like tiny. It's like 3 frames, 3 frames. So we'll go 4 frames in the future. Boom. Boom. Okay. And so now when you're done, so it took me about 140 frames. Now who can use, there's one singular word to describe what is wrong with this picture. What is wrong with this picture? What is coming up next? What will we be changing about this? So again, all the keyframes are set at the right times, right? We look, they're set at the top and bottom of the bounce, right? So what is wrong with this picture? The speed. How quickly it's translating between them. The velocity. So again, the ball, these are all evenly spaced out. For our Pac-Man moving at a linear speed, that is all very good. But again, physics are not like that. So you can see here we have the speed of our ball changing as it goes throughout our bounce based on the effects of gravity and speed and all of that are going on. So that is what we'll be covering tomorrow, is how do we change the rate at which keyframes transition into one another. So coming at you tomorrow. So before we can do that though, folks, you need to go through, follow our diagram here. Again, the diagram is on 2s. So you're going to count these frames out times 2 and then start setting your translate keyframes only. So that is it for this portion of the video. Thank you. All right, so we are continuing on our ball bounce. So we have our translate keyframe set on the peg for our ball. I need to, because I reopened this, I need to, of course, turn my control back on, and you can see the ball bounce that I have made. So one thing that is kind of annoying before we get into actually doing the work of the day and talking about the notes, I did not include this in yesterday's, so I'm going to move this ball up and out on frame 2. So that way it falls, whoops, in an arc. So now it'll sort of fall and go out there. So, okay, cool. So moving on from that, let's talk about the new stuff. So our ball, as a reminder, is using just the default acceleration, so to speak. Here, let me center this up. Which is to say that our ball has linear motion. Every frame is evenly spaced from the frame next to it and after it. So right now, everything moves at the same speed. Now, things don't typically all move at the same speed. For our Pac-Man, that was very useful, having everything move at a linear speed. That made a lot of sense for us. Pac-Man moves at the same speed throughout. The Ghost moves essentially at the same speed throughout, right? Our ball, however, does not. Our ball will be going up, or let me start with down rather, sorry. It'll be going down, right? It'll build up speed, slow in to the fall, accelerate, hits the ground, and then it will rebound and then slow into the top of the bounce, slow out of the bounce, and into the fall. And then that will just continue. So it'll be slow to fast, fast to slow, slow to fast, fast to slow, slow to fast, fast to slow. Because the ball is hitting the ground, that energy gets compressed. Some of it is transferred to the ground from hitting it. But then the compressed energy recoils, squash becomes stretch again, and then it pushes off the ground before it gets to the top of the bounce where gravity and speed are equalized, and it sort of hangs there a little bit. So one thing I will point out with this is that your ball bounce will look pretty good at the end, but it's not going to be like turbo perfect. It's not really like the key of what I'm trying to teach you in this assignment, because you'll notice, like with the ease that we're about to talk about, it can make it look really slow at certain points. And what we're controlling for is what is called ease in Toon Boom, but it is essentially the rate at which we transition from one keyframe to another. So we set our keyframes, right, in time, and then how quickly do we get the appearance of the next keyframe from the current keyframe. So by default, it is linear. The in-betweens will be spaced evenly along the control path. But we want to change that. So do we want it to be rapid in, where the bend arcs towards the top left? That would be rapidly approach the appearance of the next key and then slowly end into that key. Or, so this is it, rapid in will make it rapidly look like the next keyframe, versus slow in, where the in-betweens will build up slowly from our starting location and then rapidly approach the next keyframe towards the end of that duration. So we have rapid in, swiftly becomes the next keyframe, or slow in, where it stays on our current keyframe and then builds up at the very end into the next keyframe. Now, going back to this, so I've set my keyframe on frame 2 just to bend this off the pedestal a little bit so that it doesn't just go in a straight line down to the ground, because I don't have the benefit of the continuous transition of these arcs. So I'm going to start with my keyframe on frame 2. And I'm going to grab, I don't need a tool actually, I just need to be on my timeline. So I'm on my timeline. This menu here is for ease. It will show you the last one in the menu that you selected, so don't be confused by that. It's not going to update when you have a particular keyframe selected. So this is the speed of my ball starting at the top of the bounce and going to the ground, which should slow in and build up speed over time. And so let me play this with the linear speed. So that's our linear speed. And now I'll go change it to the slow in. You can see that my frames are very much bunched towards the top of this duration. And then they're much more spread out down here, meaning they're moving faster. So now let me zoom out so you folks can see. So you can look at it comparatively to the next bounce, right? So, boom. Now, from the ground, going up to the top, we want the opposite. We want the rapid in. So I'm going to go to the bottom one. And so, again, I'll play this so you can see it as it's building up. And then it goes from here back to the linear speed. So from here, we'll do the same thing that we just did. We want it to slow in and build up its speed as it falls. So now I got, and so you just keep working your way down. So I got this, and I'll use the most extreme ease one more time. So that was that one. This is this one. And then, so for this one here, then you want to start reducing how much ease you're using. So that on this one, I'll use the second most extreme ease. And I'll use the next most extreme ease. And then finally, I'll use the least most extreme ease on the rest of these. And again, I'm just switching back and forth. This is slow, slightly rapid in, slightly slow in. Okay. And so now if I go all the way back to the start. Oh, one other thing I'm going to do before I play this. I forgot to mention this on the translate one yesterday. It's a quick, easy fix. I'm going to grab my transform tool. Not only do we want the tension at the bottom to be +1, but you can increase the bend at the top by changing your tension for the top keyframes to the opposite, to -1. And that will make your arcs much more defined by switching it. So I'm going to make the top keyframes on my bounces to be -1 on my tension to help spread them out a little bit more. And then after that point, I don't really care. Alright, whatever. I'll just do this one. Okay. Alright, and so now, let's take a peek. So again, I did my ease. And I also went back and adjusted my keyframes tension on the top keyframes to be -1. So here's what this looks like now. So you can see how some of the early ones, it gets so bunched up with the E's that it like hangs up here for forever. I'm honestly kind of curious. Let's see if I do this one with like the second most extreme E's, does it look more reasonable? Here, let me try these. Let me try this. We're trying something, video people. We're trying something. Yeah, okay, let's see. Yeah. Okay, it's fine. So anyway, again, the point of this is not going to be a perfect ball bounce. We're mostly just trying to get used to the concept of using E's to accelerate or decelerate our transitions either logarithmically or exponentially. So, okay. So that would be easing the translation. All right, so we still have a few other things that we need to finish up for this. Once you've finished using the E's on the translates to alter the velocity of it, we still need to add our squash and stretch, and we need to add the ball rotating in space. So first we're going to do our squash and stretch. So again, this is one of those things where I need to point out to you and stress to you, you got to work in order, folks, because the timing for your squash and stretch is very much dependent on the timing of your translate. So you need to make sure that your translate keyframes are done and locked in before you start messing with these things. Okay? So for my squash and stretch, I'm going to need my scale tool. And this is where I want to point out to you, double check before you start doing this, and you might want to ask me if you're not sure how to fix it. But again, we use the animate off on the golden guy on with the scale tool on our main either drawing layer or image layer, depending on if you brought in something from Photoshop like I did or if you made it in here. But remember, I changed the scale on the image itself, and you can see the scale for that is 0.18 here in both directions. But for my peg, for the peg here, you still see that the scale settings are 1 and 1. So that will make my life a lot easier as I'm going through to set the scale factor for my squash and stretch. Now, as a reminder for squash and stretch, that is the representation of physical forces being exerted on the ball. And part of that is that the volume of your ball should be consistent throughout. So I have my scale keyframes at 1 and 1 set on frame 1. I'm going to go to the frame just before it hits the ground. And this is one thing where I want to point out, make sure you're clicking in the main channel of the peg before you set these keyframes. Toon Boom can be kind of finicky. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to stretch out my ball here. And I can see here that my ball has been stretched to 1.38 something. So for my ball volumetrically to be the same, my scale X should be 0.62, right? If we're going to scale it up by essentially 0.4, I should squish it in by 0.4. And then one other thing that we need to adjust on this frame is we're going to use rotate. Again, make sure you're on the main channel before you do this. Rotate this ball slightly so that the ball stretches in the direction that it's been moving. Now for this pass where we are doing the squash and stretch and this little rotate, it's going to end up making your ball look like it's scooting on its butt, which is totally fine because we're going to fix that right afterwards. So you can see Mike's, Sully Wazowski's face is stretching in the direction it's traveling, and my scales for X and Y are equivalent in how much their absolute value is changed by. So now on frame 20, where it actually hits the ground, to make my life easier, I'm just going to set the scales back to 1. And then I can scale again. And I'll do about 1.35-ish. There we go. So that means my scale Y here should be 0.65. Now that will bring my ball off the ground a little bit, which is fine. So I'm just going to grab my translate tool, move it back down slightly so it's touching where I want it to touch on the ground. All right, and then, so this is a key, folks. People, I just helped someone in my first period. You don't want to put this key here on this next key here 1 frame after, or what you'll get is instantaneously you'll see the ball go from stretch to squash to stretch, and your eyeball will see the flickering of the single frame of squash, but it won't actually see it, and it'll just look really weird, right? So not 1, but 2 frames after the ball has left the ground, I'm going to do much the same thing. I'm going to, grab my scale tool. First, I'll put this back to 1 and 1, because I'm lazy. I don't like guessing. And then, click on my main channel. And so I'll stretch this vertically, 1.3, sure. So then this will be 0.7. And then again, rotate so it's going the right direction. Now it's facing this way. And then finally, once it gets back up to the top of the bounce, again, if everything was set up properly in the beginning, you should just be able to set the rotate back to 0 and put the scale factors for your peg back to 1 and 1. So the ball returns to perfectly round and facing just normally. And so showing you what I've done so far to this ball, you zoom out, it stretches and reforms. So going back to here, stretch, squash, stretch, and then it zeroes out at the top. So again, following this to the bottom, the frame before it hits the ground, scale tool again, boom. Let's see, 1.28 is what it says, so we'll just do 0.75. That's fine. Cool. Rotate it so that it's angled the path that it followed. Perfect. Forward a frame. Scale tool. Just make my life easy. Reset this. Here, I'm just going to do this numerically. So this should now be 1.25. And this should be 0.75. Boom. No problem doing it numerically. Just make it come down and touch the ground a little bit more. Great. 2 frames after it leaves the ground. Here, 1 and 1. I don't know. 1.2? Whoopsie. I think 1.2. Yeah, 1.2. So this will be 0.8. Rotate it so it's going the right way. Boom. Then we get back up to the top. Rotate 0. Scale 1. Scale 1. Bingo. 1 frame before it hits the ground again. This will be where its acceleration is at its maximum. Let's say scale 1.15, scale 0.85. Boom. Might honestly even be a little too much, but I don't care. I'm crazy. All right, rotate it slightly. Frame it hits the ground. We're just going to flip these values, 1.15, 0.85. 2 frames after. Let's do the scale first. So this will be, we'll do the same 0.9. This is 1.1. and then rotate it so it's going the next direction. Boom. Back up at the top again. Rotate, 0, scale, 1, scale, 1. One frame before it hits the ground here. Scale Y, we'll do 1.05, 0.95, rotate it, ground, flip these values, 1.05, 0.95, 2 frames after, we'll just do the same values, so 0.95, 1.05, and the rotate, so it's going the new direction. And then at the top here, whoops, rotate to 0, scale to 1, scale to 1. Then at a certain point, you're just splitting hairs. I'll do one more pass. So let's see. On this one, we'll have the scale Y go to 1.05. We'll just do the same value again, 1.05. And this is 0.95. And then this is rotated slightly this way. Squash here, we'll just do the same value swapped again, 9.5. 1.05, and then I'll just have it rebound to 1 and 1, and then just do the rotate slightly. And then here, I'll just 0 out the rotate. Scale is already 1, and that'll be that. So now, if I roll it all the way back, so see, it's just bouncing on his butt. So that's the final step that we're gonna fix. So how do I get this bad boy to rotate the whole way through? So the secret, because we've already used the rotate on the peg that we already have, right? That peg already has rotation information for keeping the ball oriented with the path that it's supposed to travel on. So we will add, so I'm selected on my ball drawing layer or image layer, depending on whether you brought it in from Photoshop or you made it in here. And I'm going to add that to another peg. And now you'll notice that my peg that I've been working on is driving a now blank peg that is driving my drawing. Just so there's no confusion, I'm going to go immediately name that to my rotation. And this will allow me to rotate the ball before any of the translate stuff actually even gets onto the ball. So I got my rotate here. I'm just going to add a keyframe with my rotate at 0. I'm going to go all the way out to here. And I am going to... Where's my peg? Hold on. Where's this bad boy? Oh, it's down here. There we go. I was like, where is this? So I'll put it on the center of my ball. Whee! Spin it a couple of times. How much did I spin it? Negative 1,050. Sure. And then, do you think I want it to rotate at a linear speed? Absolutely not. No. So we will use our ease, and I'll select my rotation keyframe, and I want it to quickly dispel its rotation and then slowly finish its roll at the end. So I'm going to use the most extreme rapid in. And now, if I zoom out, we should see our final product. Let me go ahead and turn off the controls. And there you have it, folks. Now, if you think it rotates too much, don't change the ease type, just change literally how much it actually ends up rotating. So I'm going to do a little less than 854 now. Let's see how that looks. Oops. There we go. I think that's much more reasonable. Cool. All right. And that is it, folks. Once you have your ball moving, squashing, stretching, and rotating, you are good to export it, and you're done. So thank you, folks, for watching the video, and goodbye.